All right. Here we go. Looks like we are up and running. Hopefully everything is going well. Volume's good. All right. Thanks everybody who is going to be joining here. Nobody here yet. Maybe there won't be anybody here. It happens. You'll all watch it on the replay. I know you will. Once I get it up on the channel, you guys will watch. Just making sure that we are online. Everything looks good here. Let's just pull up the software, make sure everything's working there. Everything looks good. I'm going to be going over a few things, as always. Always start by saying we're going to go over a few things. We're always going to go over a few things. But I've been in some heated conversations the last couple of days. I said the same thing yesterday when I started, and it didn't end. And the heated conversations are ongoing. And I hate talking about this. I hate it. It's like this is not the topic I want to be covering. This is not the conversations I want to be having right now. But it is what it is, man. This is what people are talking about. And at this point, I'm just going to keep pounding on it because it needs to be. It needs to be beat up on a little bit. Hello. Thanks for jumping in. It needs to be talked about a little bit. Let me flip this thing over here. Man, I'm getting these conversations, the police brutality and the Black Lives Matter and the systemic racism and all that stuff. And it just keeps going and going and going. And I don't believe that the system is racist. I don't believe we live in a systemically racist system. I don't believe that. I think there's a lot of shortcomings in the argument. I think there's a lot of places where this argument comes up short. And I think first and foremost, if you're going to say that the system is designed to oppress an entire group of people, to some extent, you have to have the consent of the majority of the people you're claiming to represent. Does that make sense? So you say blacks are oppressed, that the system is racist. It's set up for white people, and that black people in this country are oppressed. That's why we're doing the Black Lives Matter. That's why the whole thing is happening, right? Well, how many black people agree with that? Because to me, the idea of saying systemic racism, saying that this entire community is being oppressed without the consent of that entire community is in and of itself racist. Black people are just people. They're individuals. There are wealthy black people in this country who may agree that the system is oppressive without any evidence in their own life. And there are poor black people in this country who may have tons of evidence in their life and not believe that the system is racist. Every single individual in this country, black, white, Asian, has their own perception of the world that they live in. And to be able to stand up and say, I'm going to speak for everybody who looks like this, especially when you don't even look like that, but even if you do, you can't represent an entire group of people and say that these people are all in this same category based on the color of their skin. That's some racist nonsense right there. And why is that so hard to understand? The system can't be you have to have the consent of the oppressed to fight on their behalf. I believe that to some extent. And I don't mean to fight on their behalf. That's probably the wrong word. But you have to have some kind of a consensus of an entire group of people before you claim to represent the oppression that you are saying that they're feeling. Every piece of evidence I have against systemic racism is statistical. And we all know that statistics, you can make them say anything you want, right? We can have whatever argument we want when it comes to statistics. And we can make them say anything we want. So from that perspective, my argument is statistical primarily and anecdotal. On the other hand, I, on social media and engaging in social media and different platforms, have come across several black people who have no desire to be involved in this movement, who don't believe that the system is racist. And I've come across plenty of black people who feel that they definitely want to be involved in this movement, who definitely believe that the system is racist. Nobody speaks for everybody. So you have to point to proof that the system is racist. This is not the tangent I wanted to go on, but I'm going to stick with it for a little bit. So let me break down like some of the things. I'm just going to, a few of the things that I hear. All right. And from this perspective, I haven't even looked at statistics on it, but I'm just going to, these are like kind of the most commonly used things when it comes to, this is proof that the system's racist. One of those things is black people didn't get called back. And I addressed this in another video, and I think a lot of people aren't going to like this, but black people don't get called back for jobs. If you have a black sounding name, my name, I'm lucky, my name's Brian. So, but black people, if you have a black sounding name, you don't get called back for jobs. And some of that they say is familiarity bias, and that proves that the system is inherently racist or whatever. There's another reason for that. I can't fire a black guy. Right? Isn't it? Or at least it's harder. If I call a black guy in for an interview and I don't hire him and I hire a white guy instead, some of the actions that have been taken to try and create a more equal outcome have done nothing but harm the black community. And that to me, that's one of them. I think you see the same thing with women, quite frankly. I think that a lot of this, it's justifiable and it all comes from a good place. But I'm nervous. If I have to fire a woman or if I promote a man over a woman, I'm concerned that I'm going to get sued. I think there's a little bit of that with, hey, look, I'm HR and I don't want to, I think there's a wall that goes up there. Outside of that, I mean, like I said, this isn't statistical. It's anecdotal at best. It's just my thought process, but I don't know. The other one is black people don't, it's harder for a black person to get a home loan, even though they have the same credit as a white guy. I don't know. You know how hard that would be to really analyze? When you look at debt to income ratio, it's home value. A credit score is just one of many factors into getting a home loan. You'd literally, in order to make that statistic mean anything, you'd have to take every application from every person for each individual loan officer, and you'd have to look at that individual loan officer's approval and disapproval rating between whites and blacks. I mean, it's an arbitrary statistic that it's unprovable in terms of racial intent. So I don't know what's there. You know what I mean? We can look at income disparity. There's a thing there, and we can talk about that. But I believe those issues are more socioeconomic than they are race-based. I just don't believe that this system is constructed to oppress black. I just can't wrap my head around it. And I'm sorry that a lot of black people feel the same way, and a lot of them don't. But you can't say that an entire community of people is being oppressed without some form of consensus from that community or from that group of people saying, yeah, of course we are all oppressed. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents to get this thing started. What I really want to talk about, and the conversations that I've been having today that really got this thing kicked off, was about police brutality. Obviously, in the wake of the Jacob Blake shooting and the violence that took place in Kenosha, there's a lot of, and my conversation that I was involved in was really centered around, obviously all these things are, you're either viewing everything through the lens of race, or you're able to take an objective look at each individual situation and say, I think race played a role in this. I don't think race played a role in it. This police officer acted badly, but I don't think there's a million different factors in each one of these scenarios. So I'm going to go through 4 different scenarios that we're all relatively familiar with. I'm going to go through the Elijah McCain. I'm going to go through the Ryan Whitaker. I'm going to discuss Breonna Taylor's case. And I'm going to talk about a man named Tony Timpa that I think some of you may be familiar with and some of you may not. But I'm going to go through all 4 of these briefly, probably longer than briefly because I tend to ramble a little bit. But I'm going to go through each one of these. And I think each one offers a different perspective. And I'm going to put those in perspective with the Jacob Blake shooting. And I've talked about the Jacob Blake thing, and I've had this argument with people, and I've been fighting this fight all day today, that this is evidence of racism. I'm gonna say this, and this is gonna be my final word on Mr. Blake's, the unfortunate incident involving Mr. Blake. And that is that Mr. Blake was not there. And I said this yesterday in a video. Mr. Blake was not there trying to break up a fight. Somebody had called because he had forced his way into an apartment and had stolen a woman's keys. So the police had been called on him. He was not there. He was there as a suspect, that somebody had called the police on him. Okay. He wasn't there breaking up a fight, which was what was initially reported. The police had him on the ground. They tased him. They made every attempt to restrain him or hold him and detain him with non-lethal force. He had an active warrant with serious charges on it. The police were in there. So I look at each one of these things and I try and break them down from a libertarian perspective. I try and break each one of these things down. Did the police have a right to intervene in with this person in any way, shape, or form to begin with? That's where I start. Did the police have a right to even talk to this person? Yes. The police were called to the scene by a third party because this person was apparently committing a crime. So the police had a right to intervene. Did the police have a right to detain him? Yes. He was called because they were called because this person was committing a crime. And the police were called in response to that. In addition to that, he had an active warrant. So they did have a right to detain him. In their attempt to detain him, did they use as much non-lethal force as possible to try and contain him? Yes. Multiple police had him wrestled to the ground. They tased him. They made every attempt at non-lethal containment of the situation. They failed to contain the situation. And we can talk about proper training in hand-to-hand combat and all these suppression techniques and all that stuff. We can have that discussion, but they did make significant non-lethal attempts to contain him. When he went to the vehicle's door and opened that door, the argument has been whether or not he was going for a weapon. I don't care if he was going for a weapon. There are only two things he could possibly have been doing in that scenario. He's either A, going for a weapon, or B, he's going to use the vehicle to flee. If he's A, going for a weapon, I'm not going to wait as an officer for him to turn around with a gun in his hand. You're reaching into the car. You're reaching into your pants. When my gun's drawn, you fought me, physically resisted me hard. And you reach into your pocket, I'm going to fire. I'm not waiting for you to pull the gun. The same thing as if you reach into your vehicle. If he's fleeing, he is dangerous, violent, and there are 3 children in the vehicle. No, they're not going to let him get in the car and drive off. What are we going? And then what? We have a hostage situation later, or we have some other elevated situation now that puts children at risk. They were not going to let him leave. They made every attempt to stop him and contain him in a non-lethal fashion before they opened fire. If he hadn't gone, and the question that can never be answered is, if he had simply taken off and ran down the road, would they have fired to stop him, or would they have just made chase? I genuinely believe that he was shot because he was reaching into the car, trying to get into the vehicle, and they were not going to let him leave with those kids in the back seat. They just weren't going to do it. That, in my opinion, is why he was shot. I'm not going to project onto those police in that situation a racial motive. They had plenty of opportunities to use lethal force on him, and that probably would have been justified prior to that moment because of the amount of fight and resistance he was putting up. And they waited until it was a critical moment, and they couldn't wait any longer. So I'm not going to project, based on my own racial bias, that that cop was white, that guy was black, so it must have been race-based. I'm not going to do that, and I think it's foolish to do that. So I had this argument, and I'm like, that's a race. You're just making a statement based on nothing but race. If you break down the facts step by step, it's really hard to say, oh yeah, obviously that cop was racist. It doesn't make sense. So I'm going to go through a few other incidents. And the reason I do this, and this is an exercise I do with myself, and I'm going to share it with you, is that I want to look at it. I look at multiple different scenarios and I go, am I coming to the same conclusion every time? And if so, is that evidence of my own bias? Am I reading the situation wrong because I'm looking through this through my own biased eyes? I'm a person who likes to challenge my own preconceived notions. If somebody suggests a book to me that challenges my belief system, I'm going to read it. I've read books that have been suggested to me by people I don't agree with politically or economically. I've watched documentaries that have been suggested to me. I've had these conversations. I used to be a neoconservative George W. Bush type guy when I came out of the military. I'm a libertarian now, and that I had to challenge and rebuild my entire belief system. So I try to make sure that I am not locked into a belief system based on my own biases. So today I started working my way through these 4 cases that I'm going to bring up now, and I'm going to walk through each one of them the same way I just walked through the Blake case. So the first one, I'm going to flip over here so you can see what I'm looking at. Before we get into that, real quick, this is something. Oh, wrong screen. Hey, I'm still working out the bugs here. Murder suspect suicide sparks looting and unrest in Minneapolis. A murder suspect in Minneapolis committed suicide as police were about to capture him Wednesday, sparking looting and unrest in a city still reeling from the death of George Floyd. The man, who was black, shot himself in front of several bystanders outside a building on Nicollet Mall in the city's downtown area, the Star Tribune reported. About 90 minutes after the 6 p.m. suicide, police released city surveillance footage of the incident to demonstrate that it was not a police-involved shooting. But protesters still made their way downtown. The demonstrations began peacefully. Demonstrations for what? What were you even demonstrating for? This man was a accused murderer who killed himself. What are you demonstrating for? What are these protests for? This isn't about equality anymore. This isn't about black lives anymore. There's something more nefarious going on here. What are you protesting for? The demonstrations began peacefully. One protester even used a megaphone to tell the crowd the man killed himself, the report said. What are you doing out there then? Somebody committed suicide. Go home. Once night fell, however, the protest turned violent with looting and vandalism, according to reports. A local Fox affiliate reporter, Courtney Godfrey, captured some of the looting and posted a video to Twitter. In one clip, looters can be seen entering and exiting a Saks Fifth Avenue on Nicollet Mall through a broken window. Let's not forget, folks, that the Black Lives Matter organizer in Chicago said that we should consider looting reparations. Let's not forget that statement. Is this helping the movement? Is this elevating the Black Lives Matter movement? Is this elevating the lives of black people? No, this is pure opportunism. This is terrible. This is disgusting. And this is a detriment to black people everywhere. This behavior is a detriment to black people everywhere. Do you know a hardworking, middle-class black person doesn't want anything to do with this? They've got to now what? They've got to answer for this, because unfortunately, that's how our broken society works sometimes. And so you see this kind of behavior, and now what? So anyway, the unrest prompted the city's mayor, Jacob Frey, to call in the Minnesota National Guard and issue a curfew, according to the Star Tribune. This is a tragic incident for all involved, the mayor said. What the city needs now is healing, not more property destruction. We're literally living in an environment, and this is why the Jacob, this Blake case really bothers me, because the rioting that broke out after was, in my mind anyway, this was unjustified. This was unjustified rioting. So it's a good question. Let me bring the chat back over here. So are 7 back shots to the back not excessive? We can't. So that's a good question. And that's part of the police are going to shoot until they believe the threat's neutralized. So I'm assuming he shot until the man stopped moving. I also think that he was probably, I could say that, yeah, that maybe the number of shots was excessive, but would he didn't die. Would one bullet to the head have been less excessive? When we're focusing on the number of shots fired, I mean, I don't know. I don't know that that's super, I don't know if that's a super relevant piece of information. And I know it seems significant, but the number of shots fired, if one shot killed the man, does 7 shots that didn't kill him, which one's more excessive? So I don't know. This man walked through a taser. So was he still moving and struggling until the final shot was fired? It's hard to say. You know, the angle from where he was shot is, so it's really hard to say unless you're standing there and you can actually see this man is still fighting, even though I fired 3, 4, 5 shots at him, he's still fighting. He's still going for a weapon. So police are going to shoot until that threat is neutralized. So I don't know that I can say for sure whether 7 shots was or was not excessive, but I think focusing on the number of shots fired, like I said, 1 shot could have killed him. Would that have been excessive? So I guess that's how I would answer that. But let me walk through another one of these. So you can kind of, maybe you could see my thought process on this. So here is Elijah McCain. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Elijah McCain death. I'll read a little bit of the story. Last August, police officers in Aurora, Colorado approached 23-year-old Elijah McClain as he walked home from a convenience store. The Aurora Police Department later said that a 911 caller had reported a suspicious person in a ski mask, and that when officers confronted McClain, who was not armed and had not committed any kind of crime, he resisted arrest. In the 15 minutes that followed, the officers tackled McClain to the ground, put him in a carotid hold, and called first responders who injected him with ketamine. He had a heart attack on the way to the hospital and died days later after he was declared brain dead. McClain's family maintains that law enforcement's use of excessive force led to his death. The officers, however, were subsequently cleared of wrongdoing, apparently on the basis of questionable body camera footage and an allegedly inconclusive autopsy. Okay, so I just got done talking about how the police were justified, I believe, in what they did in the prior shooting, Jacob Blake shooting. And I'm going to say this. Elijah McClain is dead because he's black. As a person who does not believe in systemic racism, as a person who does not believe that the system is inherently racist, as a person who isn't going to put something in somebody else's heart, Elijah McClain is dead because he's black. A white man walking down the street is not going to have a 911 call on him for being suspicious. Look, you guys are watching my video. Do you see how I talk? My wife, man, when we first got together, she thought I was crazy because I talk to myself and I'll move my hands and I'll gesture. I think through things passionately. He got the police called him because he was a black guy walking down the street. This is a completely innocent person. Second, the police are at fault for his death. And I'll tell you why. As a libertarian, what was the first thing I asked? Do the police have a right to be there? Yes. Somebody called, they responded. Do they have a right to intervene with this person? No. You have to have at least enough intelligence to roll up, look at this young man walking down the street and be able to say, some idiot Karen called because this kid's black and he's not doing anything and he's walking down the street carrying a bag of groceries. As a police officer whose job is to serve and protect, my mission is immediately to make sure that this young man makes it home safely. I'm going to inform this young man that I was called. I'm going to say, somebody called. I don't know why. Because you're walking down the street, because you're wearing the ski mask. I'm just going to walk along with you and make sure you get home safely. That's it. That is the officer's job in that circumstance. He has no right to try to detain him. This kid is posing no threat to anybody. So he had no right to put his hands on him, no right to ask him for an ID. He's not doing anything. He's a free person in a free country down the street. He's dead because he's black, and it happened because these cops were not properly trained. They weren't good at what they do. Looks like I lost my camera feed, but it usually pops right back up in a moment. It's usually just a wireless issue, so hopefully it pops right back up. So I don't have a sympathetic for the police in this scenario. They're 100% wrong. They should be off the force. And I think criminally negligent homicide at the very least. Criminally negligent homicide. Their job is to serve and protect. They completely failed in that role. Criminally negligent homicide. I believe this person died because of his race. I believe the police were incredibly negligent, and that is the reason that he died. That's it. So, I mean, and what bothers me the most about this is there were some protests, but this is where you want to riot and attack a city building. This is the kid who deserves that kind of outrage. So I look at the Elijah McClain thing, and then I look at myself and I say, am I capable of seeing? Do I have a bias that says, no, everything's fine in our society? Do I have the bias so strong that it blinds me? And I look at this and I say, I don't think I have that blind spot. I don't think I do. Maybe I still do, but I don't believe I do. So the next one, and this bothers me a bit. I'm going to transition. This one is Ryan Whitaker. And I don't know if you folks will be as familiar with Ryan Whitaker. Ryan Whitaker is a white man. I'm going to get this one rolling. I'm going to show you some video here that is actually very disturbing. So if this is violent, it's disturbing. So you may want to, not have kids around or whatever. This is a disturbing bit of video. So just be warned. I will blow this up here. All right, so the upstairs caller called because of somebody upstairs called for excessive noise. The police respond. They do announce themselves as police at the door. They open. He comes to the door. Now it's like midnight with a gun, and that's it. That's the end. They kind of blurred it out. So he comes out. Oh, there's the graphic warning that I just gave you. We're not going to watch this again. Essentially, he comes out of his room and he's holding a gun in his hand. And he takes 2 steps out. The officer says, whoa, whoa, whoa. So he immediately puts the gun hand behind him and his other hand up. You can't see what I'm doing. Let me switch this over so you can see me. It's really important that you watch me act this out. So he puts the gun hand behind him, puts his other hand up, and is going down to his knees. This is a clear sign of surrender. The officer behind him pulls his gun and shoots him, I don't know how many times, in the back. Kills him right there in front of his girlfriend. Now, here's what bothers me. First, this person was clearly surrendering immediately to the police. The police were definitely in the wrong here. Obviously, this was not racially motivated. This is important for a couple of reasons. First, this is a wrongful death. There's no doubt in my mind this is a wrongful death. The police absolutely acted improperly, incorrectly, or whatever in this scenario, and deserve to. I don't know what happened to the police in this case, but they definitely acted poorly. They killed this man. It's essentially murder. They came to his house, knocked on his door, and then shot him. He had a gun in his hand. He has a right to have a gun in his hand. If somebody was pounding on my door and I didn't hear them, if I had music playing and I could hear the door, but I couldn't hear what they said, and it was midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, maybe I have a gun in my hand. He immediately went to the ground, and he was on his knee before the other cop had pulled his gun out. The other cop he was already down like this before the other cop had drawn his weapon. That cop panicked. And because of his panic, somebody died. No protests, no riots, no nothing. I think the family held a vigil in front of the police department, and that was the extent of it. This is the problem with Black Lives Matter. This is why white people will say all lives matter. This is why you hear that. White people, I don't know why. White people they don't go out when this kind of stuff happens. They don't march, they don't protest. They don't when this stuff happens. And it happens a lot. It happens more. And the media doesn't make a big deal out of it. Because this isn't about police. And this isn't about making policing better. This is about causing civil unrest. Why wasn't this a huge story? We're focusing, our focus is on police brutality. Why does it only matter if the right races are involved? This was a wrongful death. Why does it only matter when the right races are involved? So I have a real problem with that. These police should be off the force, and I think they should also face charges. So here is the Breonna Taylor case. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on with the Breonna Taylor case. Actually, it's way more complicated than people think. There's a bit of... there's some confusion about whether or not they had... It seems like the police were at the right place. The boyfriend was, in fact, dealing drugs. The warrant was for that address and all of that stuff. So let me just... as a libertarian, I would just say I oppose no-knock raids. First, let me say this. I oppose the war on drugs, period. flat out oppose the war on drugs completely end. It should all be decriminalized. People, you can't hire police and have armed agents of the government running around trying to monitor everybody's behavior. Then you don't have to worry about no-knock raids. No-knock raids are BS. I hate them. They should be completely illegal. Police shouldn't be able to kick your door in at 1 o'clock in the morning unannounced. It's ridiculous. The whole situation is ridiculous. It's a bad policy. And quite frankly, it's the reason that bad policy is the reason Breonna Taylor's dead. No-knock raids, the war on drugs, all this stuff should be eliminated. So should qualified immunity. And this is where things get really, really disgusting for me. This is what really makes me angry about this particular case. Let's see here. I must have moved this around. Bear with me for just a second. There is law, essentially, that states, well, let me just read this to you. Most states don't allow someone to claim self-defense when they are an aggressor. But most states also say that when police are acting in their official capacity, they can't be aggressors for purposes of self-defense law. So both Walker and the police can reasonably claim self-defense, and the law makes it virtually impossible to define an aggressor in this situation. A kind of self-defense stalemate that leaves a lot of questions as to what charges a prosecutor could bring in Taylor's case, and could even lead to the end of the no-knock raid in American police. The only good thing that could come of this is the end of the no-knock raid in policing. That would be the only good thing that could come out of this. All right. So legal experts say the officers involved in Taylor's shooting, Sergeant Jonathan, I'm not going to read this, certainly can be arrested. Prosecutors have tremendous discretion. They can absolutely arrest these people. But here, as long as the officers announce themselves or the homeowner reasonably should have known they were police. In Kentucky law, those protections do not allow someone to harm police officers who enter their home. So, all right. So the Taylor case is complicated. I should start these things at the beginning of the paragraph. The Taylor case is complicated by the so-called castle doctrine, which traces to 17th century English common law. It gives people in every state, except Vermont and Washington, D.C., the right to use deadly force against an intruder in their home with no duty to retreat. I am a strong supporter of the castle doctrine. If you break into my house, I should not have to run away. I should be allowed to defend my home. In Kentucky law, those protections do not allow someone to harm police officers who enter their home as long as the officers announce themselves or the homeowner reasonably should have known they were police. You bust in, you yell police at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm not waking up. I got my AC going. Maybe I sleep with music on. Maybe I left the TV on. You yell police a couple times and kick my door in. I'm going for my gun. I didn't hear you yell police. I heard my door get kicked in. My dog starts barking. That's probably what woke me up. The homeowner should have reasonably known. If it's after midnight, though, you can't just say the homeowner should have reasonably known they were police. This is how Walker was initially arrested and charged with attempted murder of a police officer for opening fire first. Those charges were dropped. The officers in turn took gunfire into place. Their search warrant gave them legal permission to enter. That would seemingly provide them a self-defense justification for shooting back inside Taylor's home. Thanks to U.S. Supreme Court rulings, officers can invoke self-defense even if their behavior was objectively unsafe or likely to provoke a violent response. This is criminally wrong. This is disgusting. These officers, somebody in this chain of command somewhere needs to be charged. Somebody somewhere needs to be charged. This is a crime. You broke into somebody's house and killed somebody. The state, this is why I vote libertarian. This is why no matter what I think of Donald Trump or what I think of Joe Biden or whatever, neither of them want to fix this problem. And that makes both of them statist authoritarians. And I can't vote for either one of them because you can't support this. I can't even, thanks to U.S. Supreme Court rulings, officers can invoke self-defense even if their behavior was objectively unsafe or likely to provide a violent response. How is that possible? How can you claim to live in a free country in that scenario? There is a, and I want to say, maybe it was Jefferson who said it. I think it was Jefferson. When the government fears the people, you have freedom. When the people fear the government, you have tyranny. That's what we're living with right now. We're living with tyranny. Somebody needs to be held accountable for this death. Somebody needs to be held accountable. And again, Again, where were the protests? I know there were some marches, but why is the George Floyd scenario? Why is the George Floyd scenario so much more powerful? Why is the response so much more powerful? I'll tell you why. Because there's no reasonable person could say that the officer who killed Breonna Taylor knew that she was black. So it's not controversial enough. The majority of people are going to say this woman shouldn't have died. It's not controversial enough. The purpose of these movements, the purpose of this riot, of all of this, of what's going on throughout the country is not about protecting black people. It's about sowing discontent. It's about sowing unrest. Because where were they? And in reality, if you are a movement that wants to protect black people from police brutality, then you have to fight against all forms of police brutality. You have to go back to the Phoenix case, the Ryan Whitaker case, and you have to march for that man because you want to get bad police off the force. Because if you get bad police off the force, whether they attacked a black person or a white person, getting bad police off the force protects black people. Holding police accountable protects black people. That's not what they're interested in. That's not what the purpose of this movement is. The purpose of this movement is to create unrest and to raise money. I know the Black Lives Matter movement has raised millions and millions of dollars. Now, I understand Act Blue charities and that whole conspiracy theory is garbage. I know that their money's not going right to the Joe Biden campaign. I know that people who still think that are incapable of doing any research. But where is the money going? Millions and millions of dollars. This organization has been around for 8 years. Point to something concrete that they're doing to help the black community. Anything, something, anywhere. One thing. One tangible investment you could put your hand on and say, this is how Black Lives Matter is actually showing us that Black Lives matter to them. Nope. Nothing. I've asked multiple times. I've never gotten a response from anyone, whether they support the movement or not, who's been able to say, well, look at all the good they're doing with the money they're raising. Nope. Where is that money going? But this is disgusting. So now I'm 3 of these things in, and in every single one of them, I believe that the police should be held responsible, probably on a criminal level. And like I said, I'm trying to use well-known ones because I'm thinking of things that, these are names that came off the top of my head. I'm like, well, how did I react when this happened? How did I react when that happened? The last one I'm going to show you, this is another white guy. This is an older one. This is from the Dallas News. I'm not, I was going to show the video, but I'm not going to. It's pretty disturbing and you don't have any sound. This is Tony Timpa. The story of Tony Timpa is very, very, very sad. Tony Timpa is, I believe he was schizophrenic. He had a mental disorder. Tony Timpa was off of his mental medication and he called the police himself. And to show how poorly handled this was by the police department, when the police arrived on the scene, store security had already handcuffed him. So store security was able to handcuff this man and contain the situation without harming him. Bear in mind, like I said, Tony called the police himself. He said, I'm off my medication, whatever. He's looking for help. So the police show up. And they knelt on his back for, I believe, 13 minutes. He is crying. He's got mental illness. He's crying. He's bawling. He's screaming. It's heart-wrenching. Tony Timpa is the name. Last name is spelled Timpa. If you want to watch the video, watch the video. I don't recommend it. It is quite disturbing. For 13 minutes, they held him on the ground with a knee to his back, joking. Eventually, he stops moving. He dies. In the video, you can hear police after the fact making jokes. And nothing. There was nothing. Now, granted, it was a while before the body cam footage was released. I get that. But the footage was so disturbing that I don't understand. This is where I go back to the media is pushing a very specific narrative, right? This guy died. Didn't matter to them. Didn't matter to CNBC or Fox News or, MSNBC or CNN. It didn't matter to them. Only because the person who died at the hands of the police was the wrong color. That's it. That's why you didn't hear about Tony Timpa until Probably for a lot of people, probably until I brought his name up or until you got in a conversation with somebody who said all lives matter. And again, I go back to this is why white people will say crap like all lives matter. Because where are you? This is supposed to be a movement about, if it's a movement about police brutality and it's only about police brutality against black people, you don't have a movement that's going to garner this unity. It's like it's designed to divide us. And the media is playing right into it because why? That's how you get ratings. Anger gets ratings. Controversy gets ratings. That's what makes you tune in. You don't think all this anger is great for mainstream media. You don't know what their viewership probably looks like right now because of what's going on in this country. They are sowing these seeds. Listen, if the mainstream media and the people in general, if you wanted to build some level of unity and some bit of coalition against police brutality, then you would show a Tony Timpa. You would show a Ryan. You would give that as much attention as any other, and you would show people that, look, I understand that there's people who may think that this is purely a race-based issue, but it's not. This is happening all across the country to people of all races. We have a policing problem. We have an authority problem. We have an out-of-control government problem. It's not a race issue. Selling it as a race issue divides the country. It is why you have riots. It is why you have violence. It is why you have black people, I'm sure, in this country who never felt marginalized before, suddenly now, hey, maybe I am marginalized. It's why you want to create racists. This is a great way to create racists. We have a policing problem in this country. We have too many police on the streets. We have too many laws. We have too many reasons for the police to intervene with you on a day-to-day basis. I can think of another one right off the top of my head. Philando Castillo, the man who was killed in St. Paul a few years back. No riots, no protests. I think there may have been some marches. It did get some national media attention. The police pulled him over for a broken taillight and he ended up dead. This was an innocent man who ended up dead at the hands of the police. An innocent black man died at the hands of the police. Charges were dropped. I think the cop got off. I don't know if he was charged. It did just come to me off the top of my head, and I can't remember all the details of it. My son and I actually did a video on it a while back. But yeah, the cop should have been charged. But here's the more important part of this, and this is for me, this is the libertarian part of this, is if the job of the police is to serve and to protect, and they pulled this man over because he had a broken taillight, then you tell the guy he had a broken taillight and you tell him to get on with his day. Well, let's go through the phases, right? Did the police have a reason to be there? No. Firemen don't go driving around looking for fires. Police shouldn't be driving around looking for crime. Come when I call you. All right. So they pulled him over. All right. They're going to do a service and they're going to tell him that his taillight's out. All right. Fine. Why are they asking for his ID? Why are they asking him where he's going? Why do they want to see his registration? It's none of your business. I live in a free country. Leave me alone. That's the answer to that question. And that is the problem. That is the problem. It's not a race issue. And that is what we're missing. And not enough people are saying it. Yeah. And so what happens is you get two factions. You get it's a race issue, systemic racist people on one side, right? And then you get your thin blue line, back the blue people on the other side. And they are so entrenched in their separate camps that they can't talk to each other. And they can't communicate with each other. And they don't go through all of these different things and say, well, wait a minute, maybe my view on this is a little biased. Maybe my preconceived notions are making me believe something that isn't necessarily true. Let me challenge my belief system a little bit. Let me listen to what the other side has to say a little bit. Because maybe I'm wrong. No, we're so dialed in because we've put race right in the center of it that we're incapable of communicating. And if we can't communicate, we can't solve any problems. And that is exactly how they want us. Not talking to each other, not communicating with each other. If you believe the system is inherently racist, fine. Come at me with something then. Come and tell me, don't talk to me about a law, something that's been legal for 50 years. Don't talk to me about Jim Crow because I've studied this stuff deeply. And I'm telling you, there's more to it than that. I'm going to do an episode on this probably next week. I got to go back and pull up all the resources that I did when I don't know why I didn't save it and do a video then. But I got to go pull back up all these resources that I found, all the information that I found that made me go, I don't think it is systemic racism. I don't think that's the issue. I don't think that's the problem here. And I still don't believe that. But if you believe it, fine, then come at me with something. But don't come at me with this police nonsense, because this isn't a race issue. This is a policing issue. So I've had this conversation, and I hope some of the people who I've argued with have watched this video and gone, okay, well, maybe he makes a decent point. Maybe you can share this video with somebody and it makes a decent point for them. Like I said, you got to walk through all these things and go, of all these deaths at the hands of police, I'm taking one and saying, yeah, I think that action by the officer was justified. Am I that blind? I'm on the side of the civilian in every other circumstance except for one. Is it possible? Is it possible that maybe I'm not the one who's got blinders on here? Maybe I'm not the one who's not seeing things properly? I don't know. Maybe I'm still not. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you think. So anyway, I've been going on this thing all day today. It's really been something, and digging up these older incidents was not a lot of fun, but I just felt like it was necessary to challenge myself, my own thinking, because sometimes I feel like maybe I do have my blinders on a little bit, and I want to go back and challenge myself and what my preconceived notions are. So, and I also want to prove to myself that I can see things for what they are. That I could take an objective look at independent situations and independent scenarios and judge each of them on their own merits. So that's kind of where I landed on those things. So I feel like I'm okay on the Blake thing. I think I'm right there. I think that when I get into arguments with people on that, on Jacob Blake, it is the question, well, 7 times. Well, all right. Maybe there's an argument to be made there, but at the end of the day, 7 times, 1 time he survived. He wasn't killed. So, but they weren't going to let him drive away with those 3 kids in the back of that car. And if he had, and something had happened to those children, everybody be screaming about why they let this guy drive away with 3 kids in the vehicle. So I guess that's where I land on that one. So, hey, I'm going to be back tomorrow. I'm doing this every evening at 7 o'clock. So I hope you'll be back tomorrow. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to be going over tomorrow. I haven't picked a topic yet. Tomorrow might just be a news day. It's Friday. Maybe we wrap up the week, take a weekend review kind of a scenario. There's a lot of big news that came out this week. A lot of different things happened. So maybe we have a discussion about that. I hope you'll tune in. I hope you'll jump in the chat and get us some conversation going. I appreciate everybody who did come by, especially if you stuck around for the whole thing. Please, if you enjoyed the content, if you thought I had something good to say, please like it and share it. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and turn on the notifications so you can catch me every evening here, 7 o'clock Eastern. Once again, I appreciate you stopping by. And I'm going to sign off, folks, if I can figure out how to shut this thing down. All right. Thanks a bunch. See you next time.